Hi, welcome. Welcome to the Victor Emmanuel Nature Tours webinar. I'm Ben Reynolds, producer and host of the event webinar series. Today, our presentation features a new tour offering that explores the late September spectacle of beautiful fall colors meeting diverse bird migration of land and water. To guide us through this exciting Northwoods birding, we are happy to welcome a devoted raptor nerd, event tour leader, Erik Bruhnke. Welcome, Erik.
Thank you, Ben.
Not only is Erik a specialist in Minnesota, he also leads vent tours to Hawaii, Alaska, Panama, Brazil, and more. Let's turn to Erik for his opening remarks.
Thank you again. Really excited to be here with all of you today. I've been into birding and hawk watching specifically for quite some time now, since college actually, as far as when I caught the hawk watching bug. And long and the short of it, years ago, I guess you could say early 2000s, I visited Hawk Ridge for the first time, not even knowing much about that there was even a thing called hawk watching to begin with. And I remember going there and seeing avid enthusiasts watching the skies and counting the migration and simply just enjoying the spectacle of what was going on. And year after year, both during college and after college, I revisited Hawk Ridge, also to work there season after season. And anyways, it's a really special place, and it's actually been a dream since I've been with Ven to maybe have this special connection of fall migration in the beautiful Duluth area, and to be able to offer that and connect visitors with the spectacle that happens here. So over the next about hour-ish time frame, we're going to be talking about this new tour and what all entails while visiting during this tour.
Wonderful. Well, let's get started. Let me pull up the presentation, and here we go.
All right. Thank you again. So again, everyone, welcome to this webinar. Really looking forward to teaching you about what makes this area so special. And I know that I've had the pleasure of birding with numerous individuals who are watching this now over the years, who have done both the summer and the winter Northern Minnesota tours. And this new tour is a special angle of how the bird life exists and moves through the Duluth area specifically. So this opening slide, you can see this vista of expansive Lake Superior waters, distant ridges and hillsides. And this is a view from Hawk Ridge. And you're going to hear me talk a fair amount about Hawk Ridge, but there's a lot more to this tour than birding at Hawk Ridge by itself too. So again, if you're hungry for fall bird migration up here, this is a really special tour to experience. The bird photos that you're about to see are my own from various travels over the years. Most are local. And here is an American robin gorging itself on some berries during the fall migration here in town. And while viewing bird migration, there's something to be said about how the spectacle happens. You know, birds are leaving their breeding grounds, they're flying south, varying miles each day with different destinations depending on where their food is available for the winter. And the Duluth area is quite special as far as seeing this spectacle. Some avid birders also call this visible migration. Okay, so Duluth, again, this is my home sweet home, where I call home over the years too. And Duluth in particular is an ecological fusion of different environments. You have the western tier of Lake Superior. Here's a map of Lake Superior. And as birds fly south, many of them end up flying southwest towards the Duluth area. This includes ducks and shorebirds, to name a few. And even from a grander sense, from a number standpoint, you have a lot of birds that are flying south from the Canadian forest that end up flying through Duluth as well. And one thing to note on this next slide, a little hand-drawn slide from a bit ago, you notice the arrows and where the birds are going. And basically, the shoreline of Lake Superior is this immense migration funnel that truly brings hundreds of thousands of birds through Duluth every year. And the fusion of northern forest meets water makes Duluth quite special. So while with Vent, we've changed our Minnesota tours in some recent years to where we have one home base throughout the tour, and this has provided a very special home sweet home during our visits here in town. While staying at our one hotel, specifically, our hotel is on the shoreline. And even more specifically, when we're booking the rooms, we reserve rooms that are lakeside viewing. So while partaking this new fall migration tour, and of those who have even been on past winter and summer tours, you may have had a similar view. This is a view from the summer tour that I wrapped up a few months ago from the hotel room itself. And it's quite special to be able to see this vista of city of Duluth on the left, and just the beautiful horizon of Lake Superior. And just mere feet behind our hotels, we have quite an expansive walkway to enjoy the sights and sounds of the area. In addition to the natural component of where our hotel is located, Duluth also prides itself in a lot of mom and pop businesses, as well as this unique landmark called the Lift Bridge. And there are massive ships that go through this on a daily basis, late spring, summer, and through the fall months. And it's less than a 5-minute walk to get to the view, which you see in front of you right now. It's pretty special to stay at the hotels where we do, right at a place called Canal Park, which again is on this little blip of the city of Duluth right along the Lake Superior shoreline. Every city that you go through has its own charm. And for those who have been to Duluth before, you may have witnessed that Duluth has a lot of greenery. And this is something that a lot of residents also take pride in too. These two images, which you see in front of you now, photo on the left is actually from some trails right through Hawk Ridge that we may be exploring. And the image on the right is of a beautiful creek that goes along various bridges on the outskirts of town. Both of these views are within minutes of our hotel. And from some past summer visits and possible fall visit too, we may also have a picnic stop along the view on the right. So it's a wonderful place to enjoy and explore the vast nature found throughout the city limits. Northern Minnesota is unique among the Midwest in that it receives the cool fronts a little earlier than the rest of, let's say, central and southern Minnesota, central and southern Wisconsin. And because of these Canadian cool fronts coming through, you end up with a changing of the colors a little bit earlier in the season. Typically around the third week of September is when a lot of fall colors have started. Sometimes it takes a little longer into October, but these are some of the views that are possible during this Hawk Ridge Western Lake Superior tour. There's some beautiful asters on the left, and some maples on the right. Just absolutely beautiful views. There's some sumac in the middle, and all of them undergo beautiful fall transitions as the months or the weeks progress. And like I said, sometimes depending on the weather, the colors can change a little sooner. Sometimes they happen a little later. Here's another view from one of the lakes on the upper part of Duluth. I'd say maybe less than a 20-minute drive from our hotel. There really is a lot of beautiful scenery within a short distance of our hotel. All right. So we're going to talk about Hawk Ridge first. And Hawk Ridge, like the other previously mentioned spots, is just a few minutes away from our hotel. And Hawk Ridge essentially is a grand vista that overlooks Lake Superior. It's a hawk watch that's been going on for just over 50 years at this point, of running a formal hawk count from this very spot. And on an annual basis, Hawk Ridge averages sometimes around 50,000, sometimes 60,000 or more raptors a season. And complementing that is typically at or above 200,000 non-raptors, typically songbirds that migrate through. So it really is a grand funnel for a lot of life that comes through. The image on the left is kind of the signature Hawk Ridge sign. And on the right, you can see some of the hawk counters spotting scopes overlooking Hawk Ridge while they do their job, counting day by day for 3 straight months at a time. And for those who I've had the pleasure with birding who are watching this, we talk a lot about how to appreciate birds and how to look at birds and simply what to make of the spectacle and the beauty that's in front of us at all times. And throughout this tour, we're going to do a lot of birding zen, as I call it, where, we focus on the moments with the birds, the sheer beauty and existence of what's going on in front of us. And a cool touch to this tour that really haven't done too much of specifically with a lot of other event tours is that there's a hawk watching component. And it's not all about hawk watching, but with the close proximity of Hawk Ridge and with the prime time for seeing raptor migration too during this tour time frame, we're going to be visiting up there day by day on numerous days. And one of the goals of this tour is to help you see and appreciate raptors from a different angle, where it's less confusing and it's more, wow, this is really cool to see. More of those aha moments to come about. So here's another view of Hawk Ridge, or from Hawk Ridge, I should say, looking up the shore of Lake Superior, looking northeast, if you will. And while birding at Hawk Ridge, this site is known for hawk migration, but there's also various trails and also a road that goes through the viewing vista of Hawk Ridge itself. And this is a view taken just a few months ago while I was helping out with Hawk Ridge this fall. And there was late fall warblers coming through, dark-eyed juncos, various other sparrows coming through. It was a pretty magical day for birding, and it's really neat to see the colors and the spectacle of birds that come through this specific area. While at Hawk Ridge, we're going to be looking for a variety of raptors. And for as much as I want to go through a species by species account of how to tell these raptors apart, that can also be found on a different event webinar covering raptor ID specifically. What I'm going to be showing is the typically expected raptors of Hawk Ridge. So sharp-shinned hawks, these are an accipiter, stout in all regards, really beautiful, and they come through in good numbers, especially in late September. Sometimes they gather in such large groups that can even form kettles. And a kettle is a migrating group of raptors. So there's a lot of kettles that come throughout Hawk Ridge every fall of various raptor species. We'll also be looking for Cooper's hawks. Now, one of the neat things about Hawk Ridge is that the Cooper's hawk numbers are kind of unusual compared to some other raptor species. Cooper's hawks are not a terribly plentiful raptor, although they come through annually in small numbers. Many years there ends up being more American goshawk than there are Cooper's hawks, especially more into the October months. And so it's an interesting component of, due to the northern proximity of Hawk Ridge, being in the boreal forest along the shore of Lake Superior, the ecological diversity is quite unique among Midwest birding areas. Here's a juvenile Cooper's hawk on the left and an adult Cooper's hawk on the right. Next one, this is the one raptor that I'm going to mention throughout this talk that is, it's a little less common at the timing of the tour. This species does come through annually in fair numbers. They typically peak more in the latter half of October, but the early individuals of the season can show up around mid-September. So it's a bird that's quite uncommon, but possible at the timing of our visit during late September. The American goshawk is a really neat bird. They undergo eruptions some years, and a lot of that is dictated by the populations of snowshoe hare and ruffed grouse up in the boreal forest. And like a lot of migration that takes place, food is a limiting factor. So it's cool to see the varying numbers, some years up, some years down, of American goshawk that come through Hawk Ridge every year. This is a juvenile American goshawk shown for reference. All right, next we'll get to the broad-winged hawks. This is one of the most numerous raptors that comes through Hawk Ridge. And broad-winged hawks they're a small booteo, kind of a smaller cousin of the red-tailed hawk, if you will. And this species typically peaks in mid and late September. The exact peak dates can vary quite a bit, and that is often dictated by the timing and presence of when the winds come through. Something to note as far as visiting Hawk Ridge in this tour, we're going to be carefully watching the day-by-day weather to figure out where it's best to be at different times of day, as far as if we're going to be at Hawk Ridge or if we're going to be birding along Lake Superior, or maybe even up at a place called Sax-Zim Bog that I'll talk about just a little later. When the days and the weather fronts overlap in just the right manner, we can get immense flights of broadwing hawks, sometimes surpassing 5 or 10,000 or even more in the latter half of September. So, like I said, hawk watching is kind of like a treasure hunt, and the winds greatly affect when the birds come through. But late September is typically the prime time frame for seeing broadwing hawks coming through in considerable numbers. So here's a little kettle or a flurry of broadwing hawks coming through. Specifically, when we're at Hawk Ridge, we're going to be hoping for northwest winds, and northwest winds are basically cool front winds. They're cool. They're typically dry. And what happens is, like from the map that I showed earlier with the Lake Superior shoreline, bring lots of birds down towards the Duluth area. When we have northwest winds, the birds kind of get in the super funneling effect, almost like how a snow plow plows snow, if you will. The birds kind of build up on the front, and we can end up with skies looking like this when the northwest winds come through. These are all broad-winged hawks, by the way, if you're double checking the diversity on this picture. Next, we'll talk about red-tailed hawks. Red-tailed hawks can be seen throughout much of the fall at Hawk Ridge, and late September is a great time to view this species. They increase into the October months, but there's great flights of them that can occur in mid and late September. And one of the neat things about seeing red-tailed hawks at Hawk Ridge is from where these birds are coming from. And without getting too in depth, red-tailed hawks come in a variety of different regional races, I guess you could say. There's western ones, eastern ones, and so on. And some of these birds that come from the Canadian forests are unusually boldly marked. They can have orange chests, almost pitch black belly bands, and very stark markings, maybe darker marked ones than you might see down south or out east. And it's a treat to see the various varieties of red-tailed hawks that migrate through Hawk Ridge. And that's something that we'll enjoy and teach about and learn about during our time while hawk watching. This is an adult red-tailed hawk on the left and a juvenile red-tailed hawk on the right. Next, we'll talk about American kestrels, which are a falcon species. This is a male on the left and a female on the right, noting the wing color. American kestrels are a really cool raptor. The timing of them is often correlated with the presence of dragonflies migrating through. And in addition to talking about the spectacle of birds migrating through, we may even have a chance for seeing dragonflies migrating through too. It's the coolest thing. And basically what happens is, as dragonflies, especially green darners, common green darners, as they're migrating through the Duluth area, you end up with this chain reaction of raptors following them. And American kestrels are one of the key predators that feeds a lot on migrating dragonflies. So anyways, it's something, it's like a kaleidoscope of life. You have insects up in the air, and sometimes you can even have these kestrels moving through. And like with all raptors that we see, and kind of all the birds too on our event tours, it's great to appreciate and learn about them and how each bird moves through the air. And one of the things that I found specifically, and I want to share this with all of you, one thing that I found personally upon getting into hawk watching years ago is from watching raptors day after day, week after week, month after month, and then year after year. And, I kind of get the healthy obsession going with the hawk watching. After watching raptors year after year, I found that my awareness and understanding of how birds move through the air greatly increased. And I think part of that, in retrospect, is when you watch a hawk of any apparent size migrating by, you can appreciate the wing beats, the flow, the mechanism of how it moves through the air. And you can appreciate these raptors that are moving seemingly relatively slow through the air because of their height and how they perceive to us. And when you watch birds over and over, these birds of prey, you can also get a sense of what makes songbirds each in their own manner. And so that's something that we'll definitely cover on this tour too, is how to understand birds in flight. That's a big component of this tour. Next, we'll talk about merlins. Merlins are the speedy cousins of the American kestrels, very dark-toned in all regards. These also eat dragonflies on the wing too. Merlins, when they're flying, they fly like they're late for a date. They're very speedy, very direct, really sharply marked with those dark tail bands. Again, this is another bird that's very likely during our time at Hawk Ridge. This is a species, late September is another great time frame to see them migrating through. And next, we'll talk about peregrine falcons. Because of the Lake Superior shoreline funneling ducks and shorebirds down the shore towards Duluth, you end up with predators that follow them. And specifically, peregrine falcons happen to feast on pigeons in inner city areas, but from a wild standpoint, they do follow the ducks and shorebirds. And so late September is a nice time to see all three falcon species that regularly occur at Hawk Ridge, from the smallest American kestrel to the mid-sized merlin and to these larger peregrine falcons, with the adult shown on the left and the juvenile shown on the right. This is the fastest animal in the world, which is a cool spectacle just by itself too, but they will mix and mingle with other raptors as they migrate through. All right, now we'll talk about osprey. Osprey are another bird. They typically come through in the earlier part of the season. September is a big time to see osprey coming through. Once mid-October comes through at this northern latitude, many osprey have already come through. And that has to do with the timing of the availability of fish up in the northern Canadian lakes. So like the other previously mentioned raptors, late September is a great time to see osprey migrating during some of their peak migration. They're long-winged raptors. They eat a lot of fish on the go. And next, we'll talk about bald eagles. This is the main eagle species expected during late September. It's neat to view bald eagles, or like simply witness them in flight. You know, they've undergone this amazing rebound of population nationwide, and year after year, Hawk Ridge is one of the hawk watches that's showing healthy numbers of bald eagles occurring. There's a younger or an immature bald eagle on the left, and an adult bald eagle on the right. So good numbers of them come through in late September into October specifically. And next we'll talk about northern harriers. This is a raptor, used to be called the marsh hawk, and northern harriers are the raptor of long proportions. They fly over marshes and wetlands, vast fields and meadows, looking for various small rodents, but they'll also go after birds too. And they're a bird that, like the previously mentioned raptors, this is another bird that is likely during late September at Hawk Ridge. And next we'll talk about turkey vultures, which they are counted. They are actively migrating through the Hawk Ridge area. They keep our roads clean, and they're very important to the ecosystem. They're also very underappreciated, and they are a regular sight at Hawk Ridge during our late September tour. So again, before getting to some of the other birds that we'll be covering, just to note that Hawk Ridge it's actually one of the premier hawk watching sites in the Midwest for seeing raptor migration. While we're going through these slides, if you're doing a little internal quizzing on your own, that's a merlin on the far left chasing an American kestrel. And on that right picture, from the top down, we have an adult peregrine falcon flying over an osprey, flying over a turkey vulture. So these are all things that we'll be covering throughout our time together on our fall Minnesota tour. And one of the neat touches that we have in store, and we're going to be carefully monitoring the weather for this too, is we're going to have a post-dinner excursion one night to go back up to Hawk Ridge after sundown. And we're going to meet up with some of the Hawk Ridge staff and experience an owl banding program. And depending on the weather, there may be some owls migrating through. You never know. But we may have a chance for seeing Northern Saw-whet owls in the hand. So that's part of our tour, is setting aside a night with the Hawk Ridge staff to partake in a little bit after dinner owling excursion up there. It's really cool. And Hawk Ridge prides itself in a lot of educational outreach throughout the fall months. Okay, so moving away from raptors, now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other spectacles that happen along the Duluth shoreline. So here's a sunrise view from Hawk Ridge, and Hawk Ridge is great for viewing morning flight, but there's some even closer places, closer to our hotel, for viewing morning flight, where it can be even larger and grander from a number standpoint. And in a nutshell, morning flight, here's a little red-eyed vireo. Morning flight is this phenomenon where nocturnally migrating birds continue to fly during the early parts of the day, typically following shorelines or waterways, I guess you could say. And this is a migration phenomenon. It doesn't really happen in the summer months or the winter months per se. But when birds are actively migrating, especially those that migrate primarily at night, their movements through the air can be witnessed as they continue flying mile after mile. And so actually our hotel is right on a flight line for where these birds do come through sometimes, like actual flocks of, could be finches or warblers and things like that, right over our hotel parking lot sometimes. And within minutes of our hotel, that I'll talk about momentarily, we're actually quite close to viewing this spectacle on an even larger scale when it does happen. So again, morning flight is this beautiful phenomenon. It's seen in some of the western mountains. It's well known in some of the East Coast migration counting areas like Cape May, New Jersey, for example. And Duluth also has a very considerable morning flight that takes place every spring and every fall. So I wanted to share some pictures from spending the fall at Hawk Ridge this year. This year marks the largest count of blue jays ever conducted in the history of Hawk Ridge, actually. And the very talented counters, they tallied over 78,000 blue jays during the fall migration. Many of those actually came through in September specifically, but the timing of blue jays happens to overlap quite nicely with the timing of our tour. So we'll be looking for blue jays, possibly flocks of blue jays migrating by. And one of the neat things about blue jays in flight is some of them even carry food on the go, sometimes carrying acorns in their crop, and they fly with kind of a bulging throat. It's really cool. But these blue jays, they're very, very efficient flyers, and they know what they're doing. And it's hard to beat a place like Duluth for seeing blue jay migration in September during the fall. Robins are another bird that comes through in good numbers. This is the state bird of Wisconsin. And there's various areas along the shore, and also too just minutes from our hotel, where we're going to be looking for American robins coming through, sometimes in smaller amounts and sometimes by the flocks. So here's a cedar waxwing flock on the left, individual on the right. And this is another bird that typically, once the really cold time of year comes around, later in November, a lot of waxwings have come through already. But it just so happens that at the timing of our tour, kind of the latter half of September can be a grand time for seeing cedar waxwings. They don't often glow this red color. This is actually taken in very early morning against the stormy background at Hawk Ridge. But this is another species, one of many, that we're going to be looking for and appreciating as our days continue throughout our tour. There's a lot of warblers that come through the Duluth area. Many can actually be seen breeding during our summer tour in early June. Yellow-rumped warblers in particular are typically the most numerous warbler at the timing of our tour. These are our fall plumaged yellow-rumped warblers, passing through the area. Really delightful bird. They eat a lot of berries because they can digest the waxy coating off of various berries, and they don't rely on insects in the way that other warblers do. That's what allows them to linger as late in the season as they do, living off of fruit versus the insects. So late September is another great time for seeing blackbirds. There's various blackbirds that come through, and these are three of the most commonly occurring blackbirds at the timing of late September. Rusty blackbird is shown on the left. This is actually a kind of a keystone bird of the boreal forest, the Canadian forest. They migrate through in good numbers in late September, as do the red-winged blackbirds, like the female in the upper right, and the common grackles in the bottom right. So next we'll talk about, there's a lot of spruce forest way north of us. And with that comes birds that are not only breeding there, but also deciding when it's best to maybe erupt from there or migrate away from there. And nuthatches are an annual sight throughout September, some years more than others, just depends on their food availability in the far northern forests. That's a red-breasted nuthatch on the left, and a golden-crowned kinglet on the right, on the breeding grounds, on the spruce. Duluth in particular has this beautiful ecology of a little bit of Midwest habitat, but especially boreal forests and Canadian bogs all kind of blending together. And so there's actually a lot of spruce-dwelling birds that can be found year-round here. But again, with the proximity of all the forests straight north of Lake Superior, a lot of these spruce-dwelling birds get funneled towards Duluth. And just talking about warblers one more time. Prime time for warblers varies depending on the season. Some warblers actually start migrating as early as late August into early September. But middle and late September is an outstanding time for seeing a really broad spectrum of warbler diversity, even on the early side for yellow-rumped warblers. So in the upper left is a black and white warbler. In the bottom left is a black-poll warbler. In the middle is a dapper magnolia warbler during a fallout from a few falls ago, actually. Those are rocks on Lake Superior. In the upper right is a palm warbler. And in the bottom right is a Nashville warbler. And again, the weather has a great influence on when the birds come through. But from a year by year, fall by fall basis, these are birds that do occur throughout the latter part of September. It really is a special place to experience migration. And complementing many warblers that are coming through, we're just getting fired up with a prime time to see sparrows coming through as well. Sparrows in general tend to be a little hardier than warblers as far as the climate that they live through from a temperature standpoint. And so late September is a great time when a lot of sparrows are peaking, and then they'll actually peak into October as well. White-throated sparrows are typically quite regular at bird feeders at Hawk Ridge and among the various thickets and green spots that we're going to be visiting day by day. That's a white-throated sparrow on the left. And on the right, there's a white-crowned sparrow behind a fox sparrow in the foreground, both of which are also possible during our tour in good numbers too. And going along with even more sparrows, we have a song sparrow on a fence right on the Lake Superior shoreline, actually, from a few years ago. And in the upper right, there's a little kaleidoscope of sparrows, 3 different species to be specific. I'll walk you through them as if we're in the field together. On the far left and the far right, we have some round and well-marked white-throated sparrows. In the back right corner, we have a white-crowned sparrow with a little rufous trim on top of the crown and the pink bill. And the bird in the back left is a kind of unique sparrow as far as regions go. This is a Harris's sparrow. And just complementing the magnitude of birds that migrate through Duluth every fall happens to be this component of a flyway. So it's not just flying down the Lake Superior shoreline. We're actually quite centrally located as far as the proximity to a lot of these birds that come from the central part of Canada, central Arctic, central part of Canada, and fly straight down into the lower central states of the U.S. And Harris's sparrows happen to be a central flyaway specialist. So unlike the West Coast and the East Coast, where this would be an amazingly rare bird, they actually come through annually in the Duluth area every fall. And late September is when the Harris's sparrows start to show up. So we'll even be on the lookout for Harris's sparrows, which are kind of a regionally unique treat to see. And in the bottom right, we have a savanna sparrow, another gorgeous sparrow. They're oftentimes found around the dunes that we investigate. So I was talking about birding these dunes and birding the shorelines. And like you saw from a map, there's a lot of green space, a lot of big forest throughout the map. And our location of the hotel and just simply birding in town means that we also have a lot of opportunities to check out the water nearby. So on this map, there's you can see where our hotel is located, just barely below where it says Duluth. And there's these two red lines which are drawn. The upper left is Park Point, or the general Park Point area. The bottom right is Wisconsin Point. And if you notice carefully, just barely below each of those red lines, you're going to see a peninsula that sticks out. One from Minnesota side, one from the Wisconsin side. Minnesota's above, Wisconsin's below. And that's Lake Superior up to the right, northeast of there. And the reason why I'm showing this map has to do with this effect of how the birding can really funnel and increase along these peninsulas specifically. It's great for viewing various ducks and gulls and terns that we'll talk about in just a little bit, but also from a bird migration standpoint, as these birds are flying through the city of Duluth and trying to go south, some of them, in fact, sometimes many of them actually take these long peninsulas. So it's like a migratory corridor, even within the city limits itself. It can super funnel a lot of birds down through this stretch. And so we'll definitely spend time birding along these locally renowned peninsulas for birding. Just a cool little tidbit too, in the upper left, that Park Point area is the world's longest freshwater sandbar, nearing 7 miles long altogether. So that's just mere minutes from our hotel. Once again, it's one of the cool spectacles of what makes this area so ecologically diverse, especially from a birding standpoint. There's a lot of wildlife to be appreciated just minutes from our hotel. Here's some moments of Park Point and Wisconsin Point. First thing in the morning, it's hard to beat the views of all the life at Park Point. And as the day progresses, sometimes the birds move around a little bit more. One of the perfect juxtapositions of having so many birding opportunities is that you can bird locally, enjoy morning flight in the morning hours, and also scan for ducks and shorebirds and water birds of various sorts. And when that starts to taper down, there's always Hawk Ridge. And how that goes timing-wise, a lot of birds, or birds of prey, typically peak in migration mid-morning through about mid-afternoon when the thermal activity is strongest. So there's always something to see, even on a day-by-day basis. There's a lot of birds to witness, and it's all kind of done in a very timely manner, but all very close in proximity to each other. So just showing a few birds that are possible on our tour from a water standpoint. We've got the common loon. That's a Minnesota state bird. I mean, it is such a cool bird. This is not how they look during our summer tour. We actually see them migrating through during our June tour locally. During the fall tour, though, essentially all the loons have molted out of their breeding plumage, and they get kind of gray and brown toned overall, non-breeding. This common loon, this is how they look at the timing of our tour in late September. This common loon is actually migrating its way towards saltwater, where it spends over half of its life, actually. So it's just cool to see these birds passing through. It is a state bird, like I said. There's actually good numbers of them that breed throughout northeastern Minnesota, too, being the land of 10,000 lakes. But seeing them migrate through in the fall is a pretty special spectacle. The other thing is that common loons will flock together, unlike in the spring when they're typically paired up or solitary. So it's a neat phenomenon to view. We'll also be looking for ducks, and late September is another time of fall migration when there's a lot of ducks coming through of many sorts. Some of the American black ducks from the Northwoods are migrating through. And then from the central prairies of Canada, we actually get good numbers of gadwall on the left, American widgeon in the middle, and northern pintail on the right. Just to name a few of the birds that are migrating through. It really is a special time of fall, once again, of so many different kinds of birds that are all migrating through. And there's also some shorebirds that can be seen migrating through as well. And like some of the earliest warblers, some shorebirds start to show up in August already. So they're quite early, but there's actually a nice variety of shorebirds that are continuing on going through the Duluth area in good numbers during late September at the timing of our tour. So again, we've got ducks to look at, we've got raptors, birds of prey to look at, we've got songbirds to look at of many sorts. And complementing that is even from just minutes from our hotel along those dunes, we have a chance for birds like American golden plover that are coming through at the time. And another birds are sanderlings. If you've ever seen sanderlings, they act like little wind-up toys, kind of over-caffeinated lifestyle, if you will. And just like how they behave on the ocean sides, they exhibit behavior very similarly on the Lake Superior shoreline too, typically running back and forth, chasing whatever waves may be happening. They're an annual bird and probably one of the most common birds, shorebirds that can be seen during a late September visit at the timing of our tour. One thing to also mention too, our proximity to Lake Superior and the tapering of Lake Superior not only means that a lot of birds come through, but should the winds change and should we get what's called a nor'easter or a little bit of a stormy front coming through off of Lake Superior, that can sometimes provide a considerable uptick of not only bird diversity, but even rarities that show up sometimes. So again, there are many shorebirds possible throughout the tour. There's a semi-palmated sandpiper on the left and a Lee sandpiper on the right with the left image. And that's a ruddy turnstone coming around the bend on the right. One thing too, for those that have been to Duluth already on past summer tours, you may recognize the exact color of both the sand and the pebbles there. It's a beautiful color that's kind of unique to the Lake Superior shoreline, but it's a color that we'll get to appreciate as we walk around looking for shorebirds. One other treat that just came to mind as I'm giving this talk right now, if you've ever heard of the term agate, it's like a little gem that forms. And these little naturally occurring gems can wash up on the shoreline, and it's something fun to look for even while we're birding among shorebirds and ducks. So there's kind of treasures of both the avian sorts and the geologic sorts that we'll be looking for. And with those nor'easters that I was talking about, sometimes you get some debris or some washed up trees that end up on shore. And here's an image of some shorebirds that decided to relax on the tree instead of relaxing on the sand that they're most typical with. Just for reference, if you're looking to identify them, first of all, there are 5 shorebirds in this picture, 5 total viewable shorebirds. A little bit left of center is a least sandpiper. That shorebird in the middle and in the back is a sanderling. And in the bottom right are 2 semi-palmated sandpipers. So again, going on with birding zen, we'll definitely spend time appreciating and teaching and learning about these birds as we come across them on a day-by-day basis. There really is so much to enjoy. So I'm going to use the G word for a second, gull watching. A lot of people find gulls to be this immense challenge that can never be obtained as far as even slightly appreciating them. And it's normal to be overwhelmed with gulls because there's so many things to look for, so many things to consider. They go through different plumages. As soon as people start using the word cycles, it goes right over your head. When we're teaching about gulls on this tour, we're going to hold off on talking about cycles. We're going to talk about key things to look for with each of the gull species, keeping it simple from appreciating the birds a little more. And truly, I believe that when you're in the moment with the right group of gulls, gull watching can be fun. like watching these Bonaparte's gulls migrating by. This is one of the more commonly seen gulls migrating way out over the bay of Lake Superior. Those are Bonaparte's gulls on the left and a more up close Bonaparte's gull on the right. Again, just throwing some gulls in here, saying that when we do come across gulls on shore, we will appreciate them. And it actually is kind of fun once you get to know them from a more simplistic angle without them being overwhelming. Also, just a head note, if gulls always feel tricky, that's normal because we're human. We're birders. You know, there are so many things to look for. But here are some ring-billed gulls just to show their beautiful appearance. That's all been documented from the immediate Lake Superior area. And we also get some herring gulls migrating through too. So there's an island just south of Duluth, between Duluth and the town of Superior, called Interstate Island, where thousands of ring-billed gulls nest every summer. It truly is like it's like a zoo of ring-billed gulls, just solid, massive movement all summer long. It's really incredible. And one of the reasons why I especially emphasize with ring-billed gulls, never take them for granted locally, is that when we see them in the summer, we see them migrating away and gathering and migrating away in the fall. But once winter comes, ring-billed gulls are actually a very much rare bird from a local birding standpoint. We might get like one ring-billed gull that tries to overwinter in a given winter, but in general, they are seasonal here. They are not seen every month of the year. All the more reason to appreciate them when we see them in late September. Herring gulls do breed on a few islands locally, and their numbers increase considerably once late September comes. So it's a good opportunity to study the differences between the two. We'll also be seeing terns migrating through as well, like this common tern. Common terns, there's actually a few spots throughout Western Lake Superior where they do still nest. It's always a treat to see common terns, and we even have a chance for birds like Forrester's terns on this tour as well, with late September being a prime time for seeing these water birds. So, like with any birding, there's an array of birds that are possible to be seen on a day-by-day basis, depending on the habitat that you're birding in. I have here a few pictures from the Lake Superior shoreline of rarities that have shown up in late September specifically. And if you look at windows, almost on a week-by-week basis of when your best chances are to see maybe this unusual gull or this unusual tern or even jaegers for that matter, the latter half of September is actually a well-known time. In fact, it's become so well-known that the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology actually created an event many years ago called Jaegerfest. It's basically a open to the public kind of field trip during the latter half of September along the Lake Superior shoreline. And these are just some of the birds that, although they're very rare, they could be possible during our tour. This is a Sabin's gull on the left, parasitic jaeger in the middle, and a central migrating Franklin's gull on the right. So you'll never know what you're going to see while birding the Lake Superior shoreline. And as September rolls around, specifically the latter half of September, there's birds of various sizes that are coming through. We talked a lot about the blackbirds and the sparrows and the warblers, and complementing that are some of the larger birds. And on any day of the tour, it could be around the water, could be over fields, or it could be almost anywhere truly because of how day-by-day migration works. We do have a chance for seeing sandhill cranes, and like on the left, and American white pelicans on the right. Okay, so another neat touch of this tour is going to the renowned birding spot called Sax-Zim Bog. And Sax-Zim Bog is, it's a well-known birding area just under an hour northwest of Duluth. Has a long history of being a spot for seeing a lot of bog specialists, boreal type birds overall. Owls is what it's got its claim for, but there's a variety of other birds that can be seen. And on this tour, we're going to devote at least one day for birding throughout Sax-Zim Bog, kind of balancing out, enjoying the migration of the local raptor, songbird, and waterbird migration with doing some more terrestrial birding in Sax-Zim Bog to give you an appreciation for what makes this area so special. Some of you may have been on the winter or the summer tour with me, and we've had tons of fun up at Sax-Zim Bog, and this is an opportunity to see what's here in the fall. So there's a lot of possibilities. Various boreal warblers are migrating through. Sparrows are migrating through in good numbers. It really is a diverse area to see these birds migrating through. And one thing to keep in mind is that among this intensity of migration, there are also birds that, for the most part, don't migrate or maybe move around regionally. And all the birds that you see on the screen right now are possible during a fall visit to Sax-Zim Bog. I'm mentioning honestly that they can become quite tricky in the fall just because of feeding habits, how they roam around, kind of figuring out wintering areas throughout Sax-Zim Bog specifically. But when we do our visit up at Sax-Zim Bog, we are going to be looking for all 4 of these species, which are still possible, including blackback woodpecker on the left, a gorgeous adult male blackback woodpecker. To the right of that is a Canada jay, which have already raised their young come late spring, early summer, and there could actually be family groups possible during our visit. That's a boreal chickadee right of center. It's like a little chestnut, a kind of a chestnut accented brown capped cousin of the black capped chickadee that we see more regularly around here. And on the right is the dapper and elusive great gray owl. Again, one of the days we're going to be putting aside on this tour, specifically going to Sax-Zim Bog, we'll probably have a nice early morning to maximize our chance for early morning birds, looking for great gray owls and these other specialists too. I have to say that of different environments, every place, again, has its charm as far as the way the water is in Lake Superior. There's certain colors, there's a certain flow of it, there's a certain flow of birds that moves through. Even in different types of forests, there's young forests, there's old forests, there's deciduous, coniferous, and so on. And there's something about bogs in particular that are quite magical. These are places like in Sax-Zim Bog where this picture was taken. This is a home sweet home to birds like boreal chickadees that, for the most part, don't typically migrate away from here, that we do have a chance for. And at the same time with these specialists, these are breeding strongholds for birds like Nashville warblers and Blackburnian warblers and even the Connecticut warblers, nest up at Sax-Zim Bog. And we're going to be cherishing the spectacle of what makes each of these environments special. Here's a picture of Sax-Zim Bog, kind of on the edge of Sax-Zim Bog. There's just some vast meadows that we'll be looking through. Northern harriers patrol these fields in mid-fall during the time of the tour. Sandhill cranes sometimes gather and flock around in the fields too. There's a lot to be seen throughout these fields. Also, one thing to note too, a little more specific to vast lower grassy areas, are birds like horned larks and Lapland longspurs, both of which are possible during the tour as they migrate through from the northern grounds. And like with any Sax-Zim Bog visit, we're going to be focusing also on the boggy environments themselves. This is one of the endless, vast birding stretches that we'll be exploring while in Sax-Zim Bog. This is an area specifically where ruby-crowned kinglets belt out their beautiful bubbly song in the summertime. There's Cape May warblers that nest on this stretch. It really is quite magical. And again, we're going to be appreciating it during our mid-fall visit. And thanks to a group called Friends of Sax-Zim Bog, a nonprofit, in recent years, there's been a lot of land conservation. There's also been a lot of there's also been some boardwalks that have been installed too for birders to enjoy going through this beautiful landscape. And we may even check out some boardwalks while we're birding Sax-Zim Bog. Sparrows, warblers, and more are all possible. So, oh boy, there's so many birds that we'll be on lookout for each day. And I'm a firm believer in life, and especially with vent tours too, that when you're enjoying all these fun birds, you got to have it and enjoy it with great food. Being a foodie, we go to some of the finest restaurants in town, actually. And for many years now, Duluth is recognized as kind of a foodie city. A lot of the places where we're going, we'll have opportunity to try local taste of the area. Like here's some walleye and a bed of local wild rice. There's so many good things. Here's some more. Here's a nice fillet of walleye on the left with some maple butter to go in your sweet potato on the right, and some cream of chicken wild rice soup on the right. Again, when we do our Minnesota tours, this goes for our winter tour, our summer tour, and of course with the fall tour, we do get a nice taste of the area and go to some of the nicest dining opportunities available. This is called a pasty. It's kind of like a little pot pie all bundled up together, all baked together. It's really good. This is one of the little staple foods among other options at the little diner near Sax-Zim Bog that we may be visiting. And you got to have some dessert too. Again, these are just some little snippets of food from the past few years of doing Minnesota vent tours. So we enjoy good food with the good birding that we do. And so about a year and a half ago, when I started to think about this tour and how fun it would be to have a vent tour taking place during peak fall migration, I was thinking about, my personal roots with Hawk Ridge, and maybe there's a way that we could kind of connect or offer other opportunities with the happenings at Hawk Ridge. And just doing a little shout out, this is mentioned in the web description as well on our website, that for those that are partaking in this vent birding tour, if you happen to arrive a few days before the tour starts, this is specifically timed adjacent to Hawk Ridge's Hawk Weekend Festival. It's an annual festival going on for many years, and they have speakers. They have kind of a banquet, social events, workshops, little vendors up at Hawk Ridge itself. And it's basically, if you're looking to extend a potential vent tour visit, if you come a few days before, there's an opportunity to partake in this festival. And Penny, who is the tour operations manager for this tour specifically, she'd be more than happy to assist with any additional booking needs regarding that. All right, and to the final slide. First and foremost, I just would like to say thank you so much for being here today. It's been an absolute blast talking with all of you about this really exciting new experience coming up starting next September and for down the road. And I'm also listing all three vent tours that Minnesota, or that vent now runs throughout Minnesota. The Winter Minnesota, Northern Minnesota Winter Weekend Tour has been going on for many years. It's very popular. It actually just sold out, but there are openings for 2025. Minnesota's Northwoods Tour is late May into early June, and that's once again breeding birds like Connecticut warbler. We have a chance for great gray owl, Lacan sparrows breed up there. There's a vast spectrum of well over a dozen breeding warblers, golden-winged warblers nest up there. Lots to enjoy. Just a brief recap too about the Winter Weekend Tour. You bundle up. We actually do a fair bit of birding by van in between the spots where we get out and do birding. But we definitely look for northern hawk owls, great gray owls. Once every many years, we even get a little push of boreal owls that come through. And that tour also prides itself in winter finches. So we'll have a chance to see common redpolls, maybe some purple finches if they're in the area. There's just a lot to see at each places, but just want to show again these three magnificent tours that Vent now does, all within the Duluth area.
Erik, thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Let's take a minute. I'll turn on our cameras and let's ask the audience if they have any questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat or the Q&A section in the toolbar on the right. And in the meantime, I want to let everybody know that the detailed itinerary that was recently published is available to download in this webinar in the handout section. And so, Erik, I think you have restored my faith in fall migration. There's always this this flashy show about spring migration. But this presentation here is a glorious representation of what is possible in fall migration, especially in this area. So thank you so much for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Ben.
We do have a comment here from Margaret. She says, lovely, Erik. Really enjoyed learning about this tour and seeing you again. She was on 3 Panama tours with you.
Right. Thank you, Margaret. And Emily, too. Yeah. Great to see these comments. Thank you, everyone.
Here's a question. How do you get to Hawk Ridge by foot or van?
Emily. So Catherine, that is a great question. And I should have mentioned that too. So one of the really neat things about Hawk Ridge specifically is there essentially isn't any strong exertion needed to get to Hawk Ridge. You basically pull a van up to this bluff. It's a level stretch of road. You get out and you just walk around. You pick a rock or bring a chair to sit down and enjoy the raptors. But once you're there, there isn't any strenuous hiking that's needed to enjoy the migration taking place. So it's very accessible for all people of all abilities.
Can you tell us about the weather? What's the temperature like?
The weather. So the weather is quite variable, and you could say that about any place, truly. I would say frost is possible on some nights. Kind of the mid-fall frost just start to come through in late September, early October. Typical nighttime lows, I want to say it might get as low in the 40s, might be around 50s, depending on the night. And then come daytime, it could be in the 60s, maybe even 70s if it's warmer. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of temperature that takes place. So when I was creating the itinerary, that was actually one of the most challenging parts, was how to go about making sure people are prepared from a layering standpoint with that. It's good to have fleeces along for this tour, bring a few layers along. But with that being said, too, after our early morning hours of birding, sometimes the midday hours can be 60s or even 70-ish. So it's a pretty pleasant time from a fall birding standpoint to be out and about, but definitely good to have an extra layer along.
That sounds wonderful. Carol has a question. Any chance of seeing golden eagles?
That is a great question. There's a few raptors that come a little later in the fall that, to be honest, are not expected or not likely at the timing of this tour. Golden eagles in particular typically come through. They're more of like I want to say an October sighting into November. The other one, just going on with that, is rough-legged hawk. They are typically a later migrating raptor as well. But all the other raptors, which you saw, the American goshawk is a very uncommon one for the tour. But the other ones specifically are ones that are regularly expected from a time frame of late September birding.
Great. Well, it doesn't look like I have any other questions at the moment, but if anyone does, feel free to email me, ben@ventbird.com. I hope you will consider signing up. Contact Penny Seda at the Vent office, penny@ventbird.com. And if you have any questions for Erik, just let us know, and we'd love to pass them on. And I hope you join one of his tours in the future. So thanks, Erik, so much for your presentation today. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for being here, everyone. And I just want to say to Alan and Pam and so many good friends, I just want to say thank you for the kind comments, too. It's great to connect with all of you again, too. Yeah, hope to see you in Minnesota.